Hello, everybody. We are live again for another amazing class. So, overview of the class, we're going to talk about how language shapes identity and relationships. We're going to again go over anabolic versus catabolic communication. We're going to go over tone, delivery, nonverbal cues, how the past experiences shape communication, and how self talk programs the subconscious mind. And as we go, please feel free. I am going to stop every once in a while to jump into the comments. At the end of the session, we're going to do a guided hypnosis session that you can utilize. All right, communication is the exchange of information, and that information, right? That information can be anything from emotions, energy, meaning, like all of these things play into how we exchange information. So, as you might know, right, text is a very different form of communicating versus talking on the phone, right? How many times have we misinterpreted a text because we put tone with it, we put meaning on it, we don't see body language. And that's why we've also created all of these amazing tools for text, right? We have emojis, we have like buttons. It helps us communicate to whomever we're talking about. But what we have to look at also is how is communication shown, right? There are four pillars that we're going to talk about: verbal, which is the actual words that we're using; nonverbal, right? How many times have you seen someone sort of talking and maybe um, we have our shoulders hunched in, or maybe, it's interesting when I'm working with a client, I look for a lot of nonverbal communication because your nonverbal communication is coming very directly, unfiltered from the subconscious. So I might ask a question to go, how does that sound? And they're like, their face is sort of crunching up, or maybe they're going, that sounds great. And their head is shaking no, right? Maybe eye contact, right? These are all things that play into how we take in information. Paraverbal, right? There's the tone, the pace, the volume that we're going at. If you're really loud, what happens in your communication? Does it change it? And we come into the energetics of communication. What is the intention behind it? The emotional charge it might have. Does it have anger to it? Does it have fire? All of these things bring us to, yeah, exactly, Stormy. My face doesn't lie either. It typically doesn't. You might catch yourself doing it, but it does not lie. The body speaks first, and it's fascinating to watch, right? We get everything from, if you ever see someone tapping their foot, it's not that they want to get out of there or leave, but their body is talking. There's something uncomfortable that might be triggering them, and they might not even be aware of it. So, I just had to have a sip of my matcha latte. I don't know if anyone else is into those, but I am deep, full-fledged into them. So all of these communication things we're going to talk about. And what's really interesting is, like, again, where do they come from? Is it conscious? Is it subconscious? Is it unconscious? So let's get into some of this stuff. So, our past, right? Our past, our past, our past, our past. How much can we talk about this, right? From the moment that we're born until today, everything is learned, right? You're born with two fears: fear of falling, fear of loud noises. Everything else is learned from the experiences you have. And typically, you're going to be learning a lot from schools, society, your parents, the people around you, right? Your parents are your primary and typically secondary caregivers. And this is where we're going to learn dynamics, how we get talked to, right? All of these things play a role into how we take in information, all the way from, how do we deal with judgment? How do we deal with criticism? How do we deal with, like, validation and support? What kind of attachment styles do we generate? What role do we play in society, right? We talked about all those different energy frequencies in the past class, from the victim all the way up to the creator. We have the the caregiver, where, again, is that, what role do you play, and how does that show up in your communication style, and how does that affect the relationships you have in your life? Now, I always say there is nothing good or bad about any of these. It's just we want to make them a choice. There is a time and a place to be a caregiver. There's also a time and a place to be the quiet one, or the strong one, or the angry one. So, again, the more awareness that we have around our communication style, the better we can be in bringing that into the life and world that we want to create. Now, interestingly enough, I forgot to share this at the beginning. I pulled a Go Burble card from my deck today, and I got, I hope you can all see this, the Tree of Dreams. Now, the Tree of Dreams is an interesting card because it talks a lot about the seeds that we've planted, the dreams that we have, and how we get them to manifest. Now, this is an interesting play into how it morphs into communication because it's very important when we're planting seeds of the future to make sure that we are talking about them, sharing about them from a place of strength and excitement, right? Because that's the anabolic energy we're looking for. So, again, the Tree of Dreams. Just think about that. We're going to keep tapping back into this later, too. So, here we go. The energy of language, anabolic versus catabolic. For those who weren't here last class or just need a fresh reminder, anabolic energy is an energy that builds you up. It makes you feel good. You know, when you're around people who just have this energy, you just feel so much better just being around them. They don't have to say anything or do anything, but you're just like, wow, they make me feel so much better or happy or excited, right? It's leadership and it's caringness, and it just makes you feel great. That is anabolic language, anabolic energy. Catabolic energy, again, neither is good nor bad. They're just different types of energy. Catabolic energy is the energy that sort of brings you down. It brings you, it's a little more stressful maybe, but it breaks systems down. Now, again, anabolic energy is great when you want to get motivated. Catabolic energy is really good sometimes when you need to get angry or take action in these ways where it's all about you. Again, catabolic energy is that energy that gets released when you're being chased by a tiger. So both are good. They just have different places that you need them. But anabolic and catabolic energy also play out in the energy in the communication that we have, right? So you're going to see anabolic language is very expansive. It's grounding. It kind of gets you past into this place of like excitement where you can begin to move everything forward and upward. It has a lot of action potential, right? So when we're talking about anabolic language, you're going to see some examples here in the notes where it's like you can see it's very expansive, grounding, growth oriented, solution finding. What's the next step I can take, right? Instead of focusing so much on the problem, the anabolic language, whether it's the internal language in your mind or it's the language that we are speaking to other people through the relationships that we have, is really going to be finding solution orientation that can be motivating. There's a way through this, right? That is a very definitive statement versus what we'll get into in the catabolic, which is very wishy washy, right? So, what's the next step I can take? Right? It's a very definitive language, too, right? It's going, I can make this happen, or I can't make this happen. I am going, or I'm not going. I will, or I won't. It and it's not necessarily meant to be right. We're not getting into the language or the tone. We're just taking the words of definition, the words of empowerment, the words of choice. So, catabolic language, on the other hand, is very restrictive, reactant, and stress fueled. You see this a lot in the world, right? People are always fueled by fear. So, you're going to see a lot of this language, whether it's internal dialogue or external dialogue, coming out in sort of sentences like, I will always mess this up, right? The language is very like absolute, and absolute is a really tricky place to be, right? How many times have we gotten into a fight with our significant others or friend? It's like, you always do this. And it's like, I don't always do this, right? Because we're getting so triggered by the always. But it's so, again, we're going to get into that in a little bit. This is just who I am, right? It's like, I can't change. I'm never going to change. It's wishy washy language. I might, I could, I should, I'm supposed to. We talked about shoulding all over yourself, how unfortunate is shoulding all over ourselves, not very fun. So it's not intentional. Remember, we don't necessarily always choose to have these languages. It comes from past experiences and it's typically very unconscious, meaning these have been learned and developed from a very young age, from the relationships that we've had, from either parent society or the experiences that have made us become either very protected and feel safe, and there's so much that goes into it. So it's unconscious because we're not necessarily aware. We're automatic with it. Subconscious will be the behaviors and stuff that come from it, but this is very automatic. We're not thinking about sometimes the words that we're using and the language that we're saying. Right? So the next part. So this is really interesting. Tone, delivery, and body language. When we communicate, there is so much that goes on in that relationship between you and the other person, right? It's not just about what you say. And when we look at research and communication and the psychology, it is showing that the words that you're using only impact about 7% of how your message is received. Isn't that fascinating? I was blown away when I read this because it's almost like your words don't matter that much. It comes down to tone of your words and the body language and energy that you bring to it. So, again, a good example of this is if someone asks you, like, how are you doing? And it's like, I'm fine. I'm fine. To be fine is not a bad place or a good place, but the tone, right? It's fine. You can hear the inflection, right? You can hear the energy going down. You can see the body language maybe going inward. Everything, right? Otherwise, if they're like, oh my God, I'm so fine, it's totally different. So, again, there's so much that comes through. But again, we have to be intentional with how we communicate. We want to be intentional with our tone and our language based on who we want to be, right? Because we talked about this in the last class of the who. Who do I want to be in this moment today? And so, again, what we do in any process of change is we have to raise the awareness of how we're behaving first in order to create these conscious changes. Right? So here we go, getting into words, that's 7%. The literal words we choose, like we talked about, they only make a small portion, but they carry the least emotional weight. They explain the message, but rarely create the meaning. So again, we just talked about that, so we don't have to harp on that. Tone, right? Tone, 30 to 40%. How many times do you get triggered by someone's tone? It's like, you don't mean that. And you can just tell, right, with the tone of their voice. We know people enough. There's so much coming out. Again, there's also the like body language of the like shaking the head and everything, right? We look at your mind takes in a lot: pitch, pace, volume, rhythm, warmth, or sharpness, right? Look at, I need to talk to you. How many people, okay, I'm going to raise my hand, have been triggered by like someone calling you or texting going, um, I need to talk to you. And it's like, I'm either getting fired, I'm getting broken up with, they're mad at me. What did I do? I mean, I need to talk to you. There's no meaning or intention behind those words. But when we begin to put in tone and body language, everything begins to change. And again, your mind is going to go, I don't know what they need to talk to me about, because the unknown portion of it begins to spark the fear and the worry. And that's where we begin to sense danger and urgency. So, again, we are animals at our core. We are always looking to stay safe. Body language, facial expressions, posture, eye contact, gestures, right? All of these things play into it. So if someone's saying, I'm listening to you, but they're checking their phones, it's like, you're not listening to me. Your body language is totally blowing me off. Or if they're looking at their computer while you're talking to them, there's no emotional connection there through the body language and energy. And I don't care what anyone says, it is very hard to multitask. So, again, energy is everything. Is you're anxious? Can you hear a vibration in the voice? Are you anxious? It's wild. All of this stuff. So, think about like when you communicate, what kind of communicator do you want to be? And what would that look like? Be like, feel like. These are the parts where we're beginning to tap into the mind, the subconscious. So let's talk about self talk, right? The subconscious mind, when we go into a stress state, we go down into, you typically, right? Our stress states are either the victim or the fighter. The victim and the fighter have a lot, right? We know that the victim state is like that avoidant, why bother? There's fear, there's guilt, there's embarrassment, there's shame. There's so much that happens there. And it's very low action potential. And when we're in that state, it's always important to listen to our thoughts because they trigger our emotions, right? And then it can affect our gut, and the gut then talks back to the brain, and all of these things are interrelated. And so we want to make sure that when we're listening to our thoughts, we want to begin to dictate who which of my parts, because we exist in every part, right? Our happy part, our sad part, our anxious part, which part of me is talking right now? And how can I stay in my logical mind to address this part of me, almost like pulling out this third party where it's like, oh, this is my anxious part talking or my fear part talking. Let me address them. What is it you need? What's going on? How can I help you? Right? Because these things do begin to influence us. And as we know, the more that we talk to ourselves that way, the more that our neurons begin to strengthen in those pathways of identity, right? So we can either have our self talk programs build us up or break us down. And the more that you begin to say it, like, you really do believe it at some point that maybe you're not good enough, that you're low confidence, that you have poor decision making skills. And so, again, I always encourage people first be just aware without judgment of these thoughts. They're just thoughts, they're not truths. And then we can begin to shift them. So, let's talk about tools to shift communication, right? We're going to go through a couple different ones, but we're going to replace absolutes. We talked about that idea of, right? It's like, you never listen to me. I always make up. Everything is wrong today. My daughter does this all the time, right? My son too. It's a language of you're going right down into that, stress response state. Remember, it's very catabolic, but it's usually an environmental factor that is affecting you, right? You have a relationship with the world around you. So when these things happen, we need to just take it in, sit with it for a moment, assess it. It's not wrong to have these feelings. Feelings demand to be felt, but they don't have to be true. And it's first acknowledging the emotion in order to shift it. So then we get into how do we shift that language, right? I didn't feel heard, right? There is something powerful when you're communicating with other people. The moment you say you, it is like poking the bear. You did this. The more that you can communicate in I statements, I didn't feel heard in that moment. You're owning your need, you're owning what you want, right? I didn't feel heard in that moment. What I would love from you, right? You're addressing how you felt, and now you're going to move into what it is you want because this is how it works. You need to be clear in what you want. I didn't feel heard in that moment. I would love if you could just acknowledge how what I'm saying, right? Continue to ask for what it is you need. So, again, it reduces that emotional charge because when you're fighting, it's always that finiteness, that absolute, it's not necessarily accurate and it will trigger the other person. Now, I will say with the art of communication, there is always what's said and what's heard, right? I can't tell you how many times I work with my kid on this. Like, it's like, what did you hear me say? Right? There's what I said, which is, hey, I want you to not do that. And she's like, I'm a bad person. I'm like, what did you think I said to you? And she's like, oh, I thought you said that because I did that, that makes me bad. And I said, no, I'm telling you, I don't want you to do that because if you do that, you can hurt yourself. And I love you. And that's why I don't want you to hurt yourself. And it changes everything because there's, again, the experiences we have and the interpretation of the language. So everything, it's like the more clear you can be in your communication style, owning the narrative, asking for what you need, I statements, avoid absolutes, the better you're going to be at your communication style. um Use possibility based phrasing. Again, like, be flexible, be curious. Again, when we get into communication, we always want to fix things, right? Like, that's that caregiver in us. That's that uncomfortable part where we don't want to sit with discomfort. And so the more that we can be curious about stuff and work with the people around it, it's like, I'm curious what came up for you right then. Like, how can we work together better? You don't have to solve everything. Relationships are not 50-50. They're 100-100. And so when we can step into them to work together, you don't have to solve, you don't have to mind read. When you're in a relationship and you're trying to troubleshoot, ask the person. It's like, well, what do you need? How could we have been better about this so that the next time that we do it? The more you can communicate, the clearer it becomes. It's like, what feedback do you have for me so that I can be better for you? It shifts the brain out of threat mode because the more curious we become, at the end of the day, humans want to be understood. They want to be heard. They want to be acknowledged. And so the more curious we can be, the more connection you're going to get with them, right? How good does it feel when people ask you about you? It's like, sometimes it's awkward, right? Depending if you're introvert or extrovert. But when people really see you, understand you, get you, want to know about you, want to help you, it feels great versus someone coming at you going, let me tell you what to do, right? It kind of puts your walls up. And so we want to begin to ask like more open-ended questions too, um, versus yes or no answers. Judgment to curiosity, again, it's so easy to be judgmental. I know I have children. Let's see, hold on one second. Stormy has a question. I agree 100% with Monty, if I may. I think it depends on the situation, only because when someone is seeing an apology, if the apology is saying a bunch of I statements, can be problematic on receiving thoughts. So it's an interesting statement, right? I felt that way. I'm sorry. Again, it depends which way you're formulating it and what you're in. It comes down to intention. So again, there is a way, it depends what your intention is. Are you going in to find a solution? Are you going in to placate them by apologizing? When you come in with an I statement, it's like, I was hurt about this. And it really comes down to intention of what you want to do. Again, there is nothing wrong with having an I statement unless it feels wrong to you. Again, you're going to formulate it however you want. Excuse me. But again, there's what's said and what the other person hears. So if they keep saying hearing I and it's triggering them, it's something to be curious about, curiosity, and go, I feel like this is triggering you. What is coming up for you? And again, it probably has nothing to do with you. It's from something in their past. And we just need to be curious, let them feel heard, let them feel acknowledged, if and only if you feel like playing that role. Because sometimes you might realize it's not about what the other person wants. And this is all about you getting out what you need to say. So, again, everything comes down to intention behind what you are saying and why you are doing it. Remember, a crime is not a crime unless the intention behind it. Sometimes it's an accident unless it has an intention behind it, and then it becomes a crime. So always boils down to what is your intention. We're going to cruise through these pretty quickly, right? We want to lead with ownership instead of blame. The more that we blame people, okay, good. I'm glad that makes sense. Yep. Again, solution based is always a wonderful place to be, but there are times when we need to be heard and we're angry, and that is our intention, is to just scream and yell and be heard. So always comes down to that. Yep. So lead with ownership instead of blame. Ownership invites dialogue. Blame triggers defense. And when you trigger someone in that catabolic state, right? We all know we typically go into the anger state. And when you're dealing with someone in the anger state, they are not going to listen. It is a I win, you lose situation. We are almost always going to start attacking each other, throwing everything in the kitchen sink, and then it all explodes. Now, this is not necessarily a bad thing. I always say, like, I worry more about my clients who don't argue with people when they get into disagreements than the people who do argue. The question is, after an argument, do you come back to talk about it and become closer because you work through it? Or are you getting further and further apart afterwards? And so that's what we also want to look at, is like, how do you recover? Because we're humans, we're always going to have miscommunications, but how do we recover from them afterwards? And how do we take ownership of like how we talk through things? It takes a very strong person to own fault. It takes a stronger person to find solution if you want to. And again, it always comes down to a choice of what you want to do and how you do it. But the more that you own things, it can keep people grounded. tone, again, like if we want to regulate the nervous system, the slower and the calmer, the better it becomes. When we have warm inflections, how many times it's like, I'm fine, versus I'm fine. I'm absolutely fine. It's very different. So, choosing your communication style. And again, there are times when we're going to be very reactive, and there are going to be times when we get a choice of how we want to respond. And that is always the important part of how do we implement these stopgaps, because typically we are going to want to be reactive because these do come from an unconscious place in our history. So it's, how do we begin to also calm, relax, or sometimes we're just going to need to yell and scream. So it's picking the right tone, because we know if we go back, right, tone and inflection and all of that stuff makes up 30 to 40% of our communication style. Anchor in the present moment instead of old patterns. We often respond based on past wounds, not present reality, right? How many times has someone said something and all of a sudden it just triggers you and you are not, remember, when we get triggered, we're not replying from a place of current you, logical, rational adult you. We are typically getting triggered from when a trauma happened and replying from that place because, again, your subconscious mind wants to keep you safe. So it's all of a sudden going, this feels similar to that. I need to do this. I need to defend. I need to run. I need to, fight, fight, not fart. Oh gosh. Well, I guess you could. That might make the situation funny and lighten everything. But fight, flight, fawn, or freeze. And so it's being able to have that choice and putting in that stopgap to be like, stop, deep breath. But again, the analogy I always tell you is it's easier to stop a car at the top of a hill before it gains too much inertia. So there are going to be times when you can begin to feel your reaction happening. And then there are times when you're just going to be deep in the emotional swirl of it because your body does have chemicals that are happening. So the more that you can stay in the present moment versus throwing in all the past stuff, it's like in this moment right now, this is what I'm feeling, or it's like, what's happening right now? What are we feeling? Why is this coming up for us again? So there's that. All right. I'm going to take just a quick break. I know we're at about 33 minutes right now. Does anybody have any questions, right? The wrap up here is really about communication comes in so many formats from so many places. There's how we interact with ourselves and how we talk to ourselves, right? In order to shift that, we need to be aware of how we're talking to ourselves and how does that affect you, right? How does that inner self dialogue when I talk to myself in this manner, how does that affect my actions and the world that I have around me? How does that help you reach your goals or deter you? Because if it's helping you, we might not want to shift them. But if it's holding you back, that's something to be looked at to go, what would be a better way forward for you? What would the language look like, right? We know that equation of every thought comes with an emotion that will equal an action, right? Thought plus emotion equals action. So if we can change our thoughts, it'll change the emotion. And if we change the emotion, it will then influence the action. So think about how are you talking to yourself? Is it helping? Is it hurting? Try on new ways. Catch yourself. If nothing else, just catch yourself. I'm doing that thing I don't want to do. Let me just stop. Let me acknowledge it. It has to be acknowledged or it's not going to go away. What part of me is this that's talking? What do they need? And then move forward, right? Awareness, acknowledgement, forward, solutions. The next step is how am I communicating with the world around me? And how is that serving me? Or how is the world communicating with me? Now, everyone believes that we all have to change, right? When I work with couples, for example, there's a belief that both couples need to change in order to get a different response, but that's not necessarily true. We can do a lot of inner work on yourself in order to get a new reaction from someone else, because when we show up differently, they respond differently. Now, that doesn't mean that it's going to fix everything, because you might find that their communication style or there's something about them that doesn't match your core values, your belief systems, and just doesn't work for you, right? It's like, you're not my person, for example. And so there's a lot of different things that come into play here. but it's beginning to listen to how are you communicate? Where does that communication pattern come from? Is that who you want to be? That's the question. And if it's not, then how do we change that reaction? Or what is it that's not agreeing with you in that moment? Or what is it about the way someone's talking to you that's triggering you? What does it feel like? And how do we let your body and mind know that you are safe? A is not B, and to stay in that curious, open conversation to be able to ask for what you need and understand, ask the questions. If I'm not sure why your tone sounds like that, it's making me feel confused. Could you explain that? So the more questions we can ask, the better the result. If there are no questions, I think what I'd like to jump into now is the hypnosis portion for everybody. Is I want you to just go ahead, get comfortable wherever you're sitting or laying. And I want you to give yourself permission right now, just keeping your eyes open before we close them. I just want you to know this moment is for you. And I want you to recognize that you have the ability to change. You do. Hi, Claire. All right. So, what I'm going to have you do now that you're comfortable, go ahead and close your eyes. And I want you to visualize that you could be in your bathroom. And if you're or we're going to visualize just a beautiful bathroom with a bathtub. However, you want to visualize this, maybe it's the bathroom at your house, maybe it's a beautiful hotel, or it's something you create on your own. But I'd like you to imagine that there is a absolutely stunning, beautiful bathtub in front of you. And I want you to walk over to the bathtub, and I'd like you to go ahead and close the drain, and I'd like you to turn on the water. And as the water pours out of the faucet, you're going to begin to put your hand under it to just test how warm it is or how cold it is to get it to a place that feels the right temperature for you. When you find that perfect temperature, we're going to allow the bath to fill up, and maybe there's aromatherapy or salts or bubbles that you'd like to put in there to make this your own. And you're just going to notice how the water begins to fill up in the tub slowly at first, where you can see it move toward the back of the tub, and then it's just going to begin to lift up higher and higher. Now, we're going to make this a supercharged tub where it begins to fill very quickly, but in control. And I'd like you to get it fast forward to the point where it's just about all the way filled to the place where you'd like it filled to. And then you can turn the water off. Now, what I'd like you to do is go ahead, and if you need to take your clothes off, go for it. But I'd like you to imagine taking your foot and beginning to slowly slide it into the tub. And then you're going to take your next foot and slowly put it into the water as well. And you're going to feel your feet getting nice and warm. You're going to imagine putting your hands on the side of the tub, and you're going to slowly lower your body into the tub. And as you lower your body, you can feel that warm sensation moving up over the legs and the stomach. And you're going to give yourself permission to lean back. And as you lean back into the tub and the water begins to move up the arms, you're just surrounding yourself in this soothing, calming energy, this beautiful warmth. And as the warmth moves over you, it begins to relax the shoulders. It's as if this water has this magical healing property where it can begin to draw out of your body any tension and tightness. And so you allow it to happen not only in the shoulders right now, but you also allow it to happen in the arms. We allow the arms and the bicep to relax, all the way down to the elbows and the wrists. And we can remember what it feels like to have our hands in warm, warm water. how good that feels to allow them to relax. And while they typically can feel very heavy, they actually feel quite light and buoyant in the water. It's as if the water, you can feel it gently pulling at the tips of your fingers. Maybe you'll feel a light tingle in the tip of your fingers, maybe your left hand or your right, or both, as if all the stress is being drawn out. And you give it freely over because this water is here to heal. And you feel the warmth all the way down the spine. You feel it down the legs, your tips of your toes. This warm water like a soothing energy, like a warm blanket wrapped around you. Now I'm going to invite you to take a nice, deep, relaxing breath, whether it's deep or shallow, but you're just breathing in the air in the room, knowing there's nowhere you need to go right now, nowhere you need to be. Nobody wanting or needing anything from you. Permission to just relax, unwind, enjoy. And then I invite you to have a little secret in this visualization, and that's to know that right now in this visual only, you can breathe underwater. And so I invite you on the next exhale to visualize and imagine that you could sink under the water in the tub, letting it move up the face, up over the nose and the head, where you can go under the water and it's nice and quiet. And it's in this quiet, watery cocoon, this womb of relaxation, that we can allow ourselves to become part of the water, that we can allow ourselves to be in the flow, the energy, the relaxation. And as we allow ourselves to be water, to be in this quiet, soothing place, I wonder what it would be like to then imagine you are in the most beautiful healing water, this magical healing lagoon. That the sides of the tub begin to dissipate, and you are in this glistening body of glowing water. It glitters and sparkles. And you give yourself permission to sink a little bit deeper and begin to swim. Maybe you flip over onto your stomach in the water so that you're upright. Or maybe you just want to sink a little deeper still. But this water is light. It doesn't matter how deep down you go, it stays bright, as if there's a light all the way down that is glowing upward. And as you swim in this magical water, this beautiful oasis of energy, the quietness and the calmness allows you to listen. It allows you to hear. It allows you to take in all of its energy and the whispers of what it wants you to know. And as we listen to the messages or maybe just the energy, we allow the energy to flow through us. Because, like the Tree of Dreams card that we pulled earlier, your wants, your thoughts, your desires, your dreams can come true. And it's all about how we communicate and prepare ourselves for being ready for that. And so I wonder, as you begin to float and swim in this beautiful water, how as we begin to move through it, you may see up ahead floating a beautiful shell just floating in the water, holding a gift for you. And as you get closer and closer, whether you see the gift or it's just simply a message, a thought, or an acknowledgement, or maybe it's something you've wanted or needed, this gift is here for you. This gift is yours to have. It has a meaning that will only resonate and be understood by you because it's for you. You can imagine reaching out for it, bringing it close, holding it close to your heart, and as if it were almost a key or is a key, an energy that unlocks something in your mind. You could imagine something right in the back of your head and your thoughts beginning to glow. This energy of creation, inspiration, the seed has been planted. Now, as we begin to float and drift, we begin to swim through this energy, grateful, appreciative for the gift. You can imagine what it would feel like to just be like a mermaid in the water here, this energy of relaxation, this energy of manifestation. Up ahead, you'll begin to see a little bit toward the right of you this beautiful teal crystal, either floating or resting at the bottom of this beautiful lagoon of water. It is there, it is glowing, it is soothing, it is calming, and it is there for you to have. You swim down and you go to pick it up, and this beautiful crystal is magical. And as you hold it, it begins to glow brighter, it begins to get warm. And you recognize that it has a beautiful chain around it as if it were a necklace. It is being asked to be brought up toward the throat. And as you move it toward your neck and toward the throat, this warm sensation fills the neck area. It begins to activate your throat chakra. It begins to warm and soothe and open your ability to communicate clearly and calmly. It allows you to step back and communicate from a place of calm. And that energy, that necklace, that crystal, that teal color melts down over the chest. And it soothes the nervous system. It begins to penetrate deep into the vagus nervous system in the body. It melts down through the spine, through the chest, into the stomach. And you recognize how capable you are to remove the triggers and to simply communicate clearly and calmly, freely, so that your dreams, wants, and desires, your tree of dreams, can manifest. Now, as we hold on to this crystal, You begin to swim again through this beautiful glistening lagoon, maybe diving a little deeper or coming up toward the surface. But you see one more gift ahead of you, and it's this beautiful heart, this beautiful heart shaped rock. And it is so clearly a heart. And as you swim toward it and pick it up, your body begins to feel infused with gratitude. It elevates you past the place of your ego, past all things that tie you down. It allows you to tap into your highest self, your intuition. It's also a rock that gives you permission to have wants and desires, to have emotions and feelings. It gives you permission to be human and to also communicate clearly and calmly, because your triggers fade away. In fact, all the triggers that you maybe have, you give yourself permission, because up ahead you begin to see this tiny hole in the ground. It's almost like a vortex that's spinning and spinning. It's almost like a garbage disposal. It just sucks in a drain where we can release what we no longer need or want. That you can take all those triggers that are in the mind or stuck in the body. Your body can begin to talk to you where it's holding these triggers. As a tightness, you might feel a minor discomfort or disease. You can imagine pulling it out of the body or out of the mind and just letting this portal take it away. This drain, just suck it out and go away. And off they go. That your mind knows that you can still feel safe, because you are the adult now who can communicate clearly, with heart, with love, with joy, curiosity. You can begin to imagine swimming upward toward the top of this beautiful body of water, this beautiful lagoon of magic. You could imagine your head poking above water, seeing the beautiful sun, the blue sky. You can imagine moving toward the shoreline and slowly walking up onto this beautiful beach, or maybe it's a beautiful grassy open meadow or garden. As you walk out of the water, you leave behind any heaviness. It's like you're being reborn into this new world of how life can feel when we've released our blocks and our tree of dreams is manifesting in the mind. You can visualize opening your arms, looking up to the sun, opening your heart, taking a nice deep cleansing breath, and when you're ready, giving yourself permission to join me back here in the room.